Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the County of Volusia's weekly panel discussion. I'm Kevin Captain, Interim Director of Community Information for Volusia County, and your moderator today. During this ongoing pandemic, we've obviously all spent a great deal of time talking about COVID-19's medical and economic impacts. However, as a nation and as a community, we've spent far less time discussing the importance of maintaining our physical and emotional well-being. We're pleased to have several experts with us this morning who will be talking about what we can all do to make sure that we're taking care of our overall health during these difficult times. Even under the best of circumstances, adapting to change can be stressful. But today's challenges, like working from home, lost wages, homeschooling children, and the lack of physical contact with family, friends, colleagues, and coworkers, can take their toll. Fortunately, there are a lot of things that we can all do to look after our own physical and mental health. Everything from staying active and eating healthy to taking time to unplug and unwind and to be more mindful of our thoughts and behaviors. Here with us today to talk about all of this and more, we have Mark Spivey, a Volusia County native who serves the community in dual roles as a clinical chaplain and trauma psychotherapist. And for more than 25 years, he's been providing the people of Volusia County with spiritual and psychosocial hospice end-of-life care. He leads in celebrations of lives and memorial services and offers follow-up grief support and counseling care. Also with us today is Andrew Williams. Mr. Williams is the Senior Director for Residential Services at Stewart Marchman Act Healthcare, SMA Healthcare. SMA provides a full continuum of comprehensive services for individuals suffering from mental illness to addiction in Volusia and in surrounding counties. Their team uses evidence-based treatment practices and models to provide quality care and services for all their clients, with unwavering dedication to the well-being of their clients that help change their lives for the better. And also on the line with us, meeting us virtually, is Omar Guerrero. He is a health coach and registered dietitian and certified personal trainer for Cigna. Omar designs wellness programs and nutritional counseling services to guide clients in overcoming their health challenges. He's experienced in exercise physiology, personal training, and nutritional sciences to influence people in creating sustainable life changes. A registered dietitian with Cigna, he partners with exercise physiologists and dietetic leaders to facilitate seminars or presentations that offer emerging strategies for achieving health improvement goals. So with that, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and thank you all online for our viewers. For those following along on Facebook, we know that you might have some questions for our panel, so please feel free to type those into the comments. And at the conclusion of the session, we'll be able to pick out a few to answer. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And Omar, if we could, let's begin with you, sir, if you don't mind. I'd like to take a question. The first question that we have for you is, with this pandemic, our community and our world really was asked to stay at home. What are some recommendations for how people can stay fit or active during these times of quarantine?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. So when it comes to physical activity, the really key factor is really finding out what you enjoy. Right? Most of the time, some of us just force ourselves to do a bunch of different movements, right? Force ourselves to do a bunch of different physical activity movements. But especially during these times, it's going to be about finding what's going to work best for you. Whether that's, hey, I'm going to go out for a walk, right? Maybe that's, I'm going to go out for a jog. Maybe I like biking, right? Maybe it's doing some jump rope. So it's going to vary per person, per individual, right? And it's really going to be finding out, maybe it's, I'm going to go out with my family. Right, I'm going to go do out some physical activity with my family for a walk. Right, it's also a nice little way to just kind of get out and get some air. Right, kind of go outside. You can also be doing yoga if that's something you would want to do. And then maybe if you are used to just actual resistance training, right, doing body weight movements throughout your, you can go outside and do body weight movements. You can stay indoors if you want to do body weight movements as well. And these would be anything including, right, doing your body weight squats, right? If you want to do that, there are still creative ways to stay physically fit while during this pandemic, right? But that key factor is really going to be finding out what is it that you enjoy, right? And how can you incorporate that into that daily routine, if that kind of makes sense.
That's certainly helpful, and those are great tips, Omar. I know the easy part of us will want to stay on the couch, but how important it is to be able to get out and make yourself physically active. So now, Mark, we know that exercise can be a good stress reliever. And speaking of stresses, can you describe some of the community psychosocial dynamics that you observe in your daily practice?
I'm noticing what I'm calling a shift in collective consciousness. The society fabric, we have a couple of words we're using now, underlying conditions for physical issues. There's a lot of underlying conditions for psychosocial and psychological issues. I often tell the doctors and the nurses and people I work with, consider everyone a potential psych case because our way of life has changed and everyone's a bit edgy and anxious. There's a few of them that I've noticed over the last few weeks, particularly fear, anger, and frustration. And fear usually manifests itself in several different ways. People often self-medicate with fear. They'll often act out. And anger, they'll often defy, and then they'll often move into behaviors that are sometimes inappropriate. And we see frustration, short tempers, caustic language, mask shaming has become a new word. And there are also people that are showing some positive traits, surprisingly, but not completely a surprise in what I call the difference between fear and faith. And faith doesn't have to be faith in God or a church, although it can be. It's faith in oneself or faith in the community, or just looking at history and knowing that history has taught us that we can and will survive. And so there are people that are using faith to get themselves grounded and spiritually help themselves through it. You can easily see the difference between the two. By and large, I would say, Kevin, that many people today are simply unsure and uncertain and living in this shift of this collective conscious new way of living life, and it's not something that most people have skill sets for, so they're having to learn new skills.
Interesting. That's great information, Mark. So, Andrew, this is a good time to bring you in. Mark just described, some of the common feelings that individuals might be experiencing right now, and you mentioned underlying conditions. In your group, Stuart Marchman Act is here in Volusia to offer services to those individuals who may be struggling. What services does SMA Healthcare offer for Volusia County, particularly how it affects COVID-19?
Okay, good question, Kevin. One of the things about SMA Healthcare, we are the leading provider when it comes to mental health and substance abuse services. We have been providing services for over 50 years in Volusia County. So we have a strong footprint in our community. Some of the services that we provide is residential services, outpatient services, outreach, crisis services, telehealth services, justice services, and also prevention services. We also have a user-friendly website, which is smahealthcare.org, that people can access in regards to looking at the details of the services that we provide.
That's great. So it's smahealthcare.org.
Yes, sir.
That's the easiest way to get on the website. Excellent. All right, we'll move over to Omar virtually again. Omar, let's switch to another factor that affects our mental wellness and overall well-being, our diet. Right now, people may be spending a lot of time at home, and that can lead to a lot of snacking. I'm guilty of that too, or not making perhaps the best food choices. We've also been asked to limit trips to the crowded areas, such as the grocery stores. So how can households limit their grocery shopping and make good food choices while they're here in this state of affairs?
So when it comes to grocery shopping, the really key factor in that initial step to really limit that is going to be planning ahead of time, right? We all have definitely done it where we've been completely hungry and it's like, I just don't have anything, so I'm going to go to the grocery store, right, without a plan, and you just kind of pick at everything, right? But if you kind of plan ahead of time, you can almost plan for 1 or 2 weeks in advance, right? And then when you get to the grocery store, right, what are some of the items you might want to look for to kind of keep that shelf stableness, right, for 1 to 2 weeks? So in this case, right, some of those shelf-stable products would be things like canned beans, right, canned vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains. And I know, of course, right, sometimes canned products do get a bad rap, but when you're looking at these products, it's really looking at maybe some of the lower sodium options, right? When you're kind of looking for those canned vegetables as well. Another great item that I actually always love to use is frozen vegetables and frozen fruit. Because we all have definitely had that time where I may buy my regular produce, right? Get a whole bunch. I'm like, I'm going to eat asparagus every day because I love it. Then all of a sudden, day 2 or 3, you look in the fridge, you're like, I haven't eaten any of it. It's going bad, right? It's all gone already. So frozen vegetables and frozen fruits is an ideal and great way to use what you need. Sometimes with frozen fruits, what I'll do is I'll pre-portion out some baggies, take it from the freezer, put it in the fridge and let it thaw. And all of a sudden, maybe the next day, I'm like, hey, I have a couple berries I have for a snack, right? Or I'm going to use those frozen vegetables that day, right? So it's definitely a good way to preserve that in the long run. Another good way to really preserve that is what I say is you got to start getting very creative, right? Because we've all definitely done it where I'm going to eat the same thing every day. And then all of a sudden, right, 3 or 4 days later, you get bored of your food. So being really creative with your food is definitely a great way to make sure you're still enjoying it. And that could be things from, I've done it where I've done a sheet pan and I may make 3 columns and maybe it's all chicken, but in my 3 columns, I'm seasoning them differently, right? So I'm flavoring them differently. So at that same time, now I'm giving myself a variety. I'm giving myself options, right, to enjoy. That way I can also kind of have that creativity to still have that plan that I created to last a little bit longer, right? Or maybe another good tip that I always tell people is if you're planning for the grocery store, maybe you want to make a big casserole. Casseroles are really great at, they freeze well, right? So if I have a big casserole, I can also freeze it so that way maybe I'm not going to use it till next week. But that way you still get another option, right? You're still creating that variety. So that key tip when you're planning out is making sure you're creating variety. And that's the best way to sustain that for 2 weeks. Because if you don't have that variety, right, you get bored. So kind of creating that variety, being creative with those foods, getting the produce, you can get canned, right? Canned beans, canned produce, you can get frozen produce. And that's definitely a good way to really help that last a little bit longer.
Thank you, Amar. So, Mark, we're talking more about conscious decisions on what we buy and how we eat. We know people cope with stress and anxiety in many different ways. Some people eat, some people get depressed. What are some of the tips that you recommend on enhancing our awareness as to how we become more mindful of our emotions during this challenging time?
Kevin, mindfulness has been around for a long time, and people are often quoted as saying, stay in the now, be in the present moment. It's really important to understand what mindfulness is. It's quite simple. Mindfulness is a moment-by-moment awareness of oneself, the sensations of one's body, one's environment, learning how to be with oneself and learning how to pay attention to what typically in our modern society we spend our time distracting ourselves from. So mindfulness, I like to think of it in a simple way, PAP, be present, be aware, and be at peace. And in being present, I'm talking about being in the now. Being in the now is basically not doing what most of us do. Many of us are tempted to look back at yesterday and say, I wish things were the way they used to be. Or they'll look into the future and say, oh, I can't wait for this to be over so we can get back to normal. But these same people don't often have very good normals to begin with. And so what's interesting is while we're using our energy to go back in time and long for and looking at the future, we're missing our now. We're sacrificing our moment now, and we're not living in the moment. We're not living in the now. So it's very important to be mindful that we tend to do this. We tend to live in the past and look to the future while we miss our present. And so the being present and accounted for in your own life is important. People have asked me recently, Mark, why am I so tired? Why am I so fatigued? Why do I just not feel like doing anything in the house or in the yard? Well, being so unmindful and thinking about the way things used to be and when will things get back to normal in the future, it's mentally and emotionally draining, and it's fatiguing, and it takes a toll on us. So I always recommend people stay in the moment, stay in the now, live for the day, and act like your one day is all you have, because it is. And then moving on to being aware, awareness is establish a routine. I'll recommend to people, make your day a routine, even if it's small things like getting up, taking a shower, making your bed, getting dressed for the day. You've already accomplished something. And those tiny steps become very big, particularly if you're unemployed or you don't have a sense of order any longer in your life. For many Americans, work orders our life. And for a lot of us, our work schedules have altered or disappeared, so we're being forced to try and create new routines. So I'll tell people, small things are big. Keep it simple, but every day, get up, make your bed, get dressed, and get prepared for your day, because you need that sense of routine to keep your sense of order in line. Control what you can in your life. We feel out of control during this pandemic. We don't have a whole lot of say in when it's going to end and when things are going to change. So I'll tell people, try and control what you can. Go slow and control the things in your life that you can, particularly unplug unnecessary news. A lot of people are sitting at home and literally feeding themselves with a lot of negativity and adding to their catastrophic thinking and frightening themselves. So I'll say unplug unnecessary news. If you must have news, filter it down to one credible source and treat it like you would a soap opera. Check it every 3 days. Not much will have changed, because you will hear of changes through your social media or your friends if it's significant. Don't just fasten yourself to the news. Unplug yourself. Manage your thoughts. Manage your emotions. Don't let them get the best of you. Pay attention to your thoughts, your emotions, and to your behaviors. And practice your version of faith. Faith is not one size fits all. It isn't always God or church. Faith can be belief in yourself, belief that things will get better, looking at history and knowing that you've gotten through different times. We here in Florida are excellent at handling hurricanes. Well, this is a hurricane of sorts. It's just different. So, and finally, let's move on to be at peace or have pace. And when I say be at peace, I mean go slow, be steady, practice time management. And by time management, it sort of goes right back to being in the now. Time is our greatest asset. It's not our money. It's not our job. It's our greatest limited, non-renewable asset. So pay attention to the time that you have. Don't squander it. And I always recommend every day, finish your day with writing down with actual pen or pencil on paper, not on the computer. Write it down, 3 positive things that happened in your life today. And then under those positive things, write down why they're positive. And that connects the brain and helps rewire the brain. It's got a fancy term called neuroplasticity, and it's basically teaching our brain to look for positive and what's going right in our life as opposed to what's not always going so well.
Excellent advice. You know, I know that there's some psychological thoughts from us being human beings and being, you know, the hunters and gatherers, that our minds are wired to automatically think negatively. So that art of putting things down positively, like you said, it makes us more mindful to consciously think about the positive and seek the positive, because it's too natural for us to think about the negative.
It's really the ideal time to retrain your brain. It's got a fancy term, it's called cognitive restructuring, but basically we can train our brains to think differently, and this is the perfect time for us to actually take that part of the brain that's always so negative and unpack those things and put in there something more positive that's useful, so that when we do move back into our new and different reality, we'll be better equipped to deal with things that always don't go our way.
So true. And if I could also just point, one thing that you said was, a lot of us, while we're thinking of what we're going through this pandemic, we're thinking we can't wait until things get back to normal, like you said. But using your PAP strategy, being at peace, we know that the normal is going to change. We might not ever be able to go back because we're going to be living with this virus. The virus isn't going to go away.
Yeah, it's here to stay, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Look, people don't like change, and yet, ironically, change is endemic to the human condition. We sign our yearbooks, don't change, stay the way you are. That's just stupid, because how are you going to do it? I mean, if you didn't change and you stayed the way you were, you'd never leave the womb. So life requires change. It need not always be frightening. It simply is something for us to embrace. I always talk about embracing the chaos, because in the chaos, in the storm, is the lesson. That's how we learn. So I like to look at at chaos or crisis as an opportunity for learning, improving. We always grow when things are a bit challenging. We don't grow when things are stagnant. And many people have come to me and said, Mark, I just want things to get back to normal. And they're the same people that came to me 3 or 4 months ago in private practice and whispered quietly, I don't like my job, I'm not happy, I'm not doing what I meant to do. Well, you want to go back to that. So this is the perfect opportunity for you to do what your heart desires. So looking at this as an opportunity, perhaps in disguise, perhaps unwanted, but it is an opportunity nonetheless, Kevin.
Excellent. So speaking of change and emotions, Andrew, with Mark, discussing some of those tips and for controlling our emotions and our ability to, or inability to adapt to change, that doesn't look the same for everyone. If someone is seeking help for themselves, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, or perhaps even a loved one who is struggling with mental health or substance abuse, what should they do?
Kevin, one of the things that I am extremely proud of is SMA did not close their doors. Our doors remain open. All the services that I articulated earlier, we did not miss a beat in regards to operation. We consulted with the local health department. We used CDC guidelines in terms of modifying our operation. We increased the volume of offering telehealth, phone and video conferences. We stopped visitation. We provided masks and gloves and PPE equipment to our staff and clients. Staff are screened every day in regards to checking temperatures and asking the required questions from CDC. And we also, we require staff that they are experiencing any type of COVID-19 symptoms, that they must remain home. And so our staff has been true heroes. They have stepped up, and we like to refer to them as SMA rock stars because they come to work every day to make sure these services are provided. Now, how can the individual access these services? We have a 24-hour access center. It's a 24-hour hotline. The Access Center will link you to the services that we provide. That number is 1-800-539-4228. Again, 1-800-539-4228.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew. So, Andrew and Mark, you might both want to jump in on this one. We know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Why is it important to acknowledge mental health during this month every year, and especially this year?
Andrew, you jump first.
I love jumping. Mental health awareness is important because of educating the actual community on what services is provided, providing aid to linking individuals to mental health services. We, as Mark said before, we have a new norm, and people, they have a tough time adjusting. So it's imperative that we are aware of the services that are available and that can assist them through this current situation. I just personally, me personally, I haven't seen my mom and dad in about 2 months.
Wow.
And so the other day, me and my wife, we got in the car, we rolled by their house, and we were saying hello to them, and we had a conversation while they was at the doorstep. And so, needless to say, we were taking the actions that we needed to help, ease this situation. The other thing is social media. It is doing a tremendous job in regards to options that we have, Zoom and video conferences and stuff like that people really need to access during this difficult time. And so social media has played a huge part. But the main thing is being proactive when it comes to our services. As I mentioned before, our access number. If you're experiencing any tough time, please reach out to us so we can help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. I like that we have Mental Health Month, but really every day is mental health. Mm-hmm. And I love that people are driving by and honking horns and noticing first-line responders, nurses, doctors, food workers, death care workers, sanitation workers, and yet I can honestly say without any problem that behind every one of them is a mental health professional that they go to for the support they need to do their job. And it's important that we recognize what often gets buried, the importance of mental health. the brain is what starts everything, and we have to be well and capable of managing our own day-to-day lives. And it sometimes gets glossed over because so much is assumed. And believe it or not, in 2020, you'd like to think we're a little further along, but we're somewhat still in the dark ages when it comes to our thinking about mental health and access. Everyone needs to access mental health. Everyone needs someone to talk to and confide in. Just a safe, non-judgmental place to say it. And a lot of our frontline workers couldn't continue to be on the front line without that support. So for me, every day is Mental Health Day, but I love the fact that we get a whole month to celebrate it.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? And, when you're, again, going back to your PAP model, being in the present, one thing that we have noticed by just doing these panels and doing the conferences that we're doing, May is Mental Health Month. This week is Nurses Week. It's also Teacher Appreciation Week.
Hospital
and
Week.
It's Hospital Week.
That's true.
And it's also Public Service Employees Week. And being in the present and acknowledging that, I mean, what a sort of serendipitous time to be able to see and recognize and acknowledge. It almost just seems ironic.
Yeah. Some might even say that it's synchronistic and that this is a necessary or intentional universal reset. And I won't go that far in this particular moment. That's not why I'm here. But I get asked a lot, Mark, why is this happening? And of course, the spiritual and psychological parts of me say, I think this is intentional. I think it's a deliberate reset and an opportunity for us to return to some of the things that we've gotten away from. I don't like it. No one likes it. It's often painful, like going to a dentist hurts, but the hurt helps. So it's a necessary reset that I think that we can benefit from if we'll just see it as a positive opportunity as opposed to allowing our own emotions to get the best of us.
Well, there's certainly positive that comes out of adversity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Omar. Well, why don't we move to Facebook to see if we have any questions on Facebook?
We do. Before we ask the question, though, Sharon commented and said she's been exercising every day and she's lost 16 pounds through this pandemic. So congratulations to Sharon. Way to go. I'm sure we have lots of other people out there who have those accomplishments. And we do have a question from Tori F. She has asked if AA is continuing to have meetings.
As of right now, to my knowledge, AA is using video conference. And so you can access AA through video conference in regards to the groups that's been provided.
Excellent. And there again, that's another example of the transformation of change in how we all do business and carry out our services. So it's great that we have this virtual capability.
Yeah.
It's real good. Any other questions on Facebook? It looks like that's it. And congratulations, Sharon. That's wonderful. And for all of you. Any other comments for the group before we close up? Omar?
No, that's awesome, by the way, Sharon. Congrats. And I look forward to seeing where that continues.
Excellent. Well, that'll wrap up today's panel discussion. We want to thank you so much for our panelists for being here. You've all provided a great deal of important information during this unique time in our lives that is certainly proving to be an uncertain and challenging time. Thank you to all the audience for taking the time out on your Friday morning to join us. I'd like to remind everybody to stay safe, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you're in need of help. Assistance is there for you. And Andrew, could you just repeat that number for everyone one more time for the 24-hour hotline?
I sure can. That number is 1-800-539-4228.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you all. Have a great Friday. Take care and stay safe.
Stay connected with the latest Volusia County news, events, and updates on our social media channels. Like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Catch up with previous stories on YouTube, or just head over to our website, volusia.org.